Good evening, everybody. Welcome to The Chosen Life. I am your host, as always, The Chosen Lawyer. Today's guest, it is honestly a treat because from the minute I met this man, I was excited because I'm like, this man lives the chosen life. He's the embodiment of the chosen life. So you watch these beer commercials and you hear about the world's most interesting man. Nah, it's not that guy saying, stay thirsty, my friends. It's the man that I know as Superdoc, but you know him as RJ Kama. RJ, welcome to the chosen life.
It's quite an intro. I should quit while I'm ahead. How's it going?
When I'm about to record an episode, I actually marinate from the second I wake up to the time we record the episode of where I'm going to go with the intro. And I honestly thought to myself, like, here's a man when I met you the first time, and this is actually the second time we're meeting, right? The first time we met face to face, and you said, wow, that's what your face looks like because you were wearing a mask when we first met. But I thought to myself, here's a man that truly thinks about what makes him happy and puts together the life that he wants, and he's living his chosen life. And when I saw you, I'm like, man, that's what I want to strive towards. You really set the bar high for us, my friends.
How have you been?
I've been good. I've been now 2 years since we've seen each other.
Yeah,
a lot's been happening, right?
Well,
and
we didn't even shake hands the first time.
We did not, but you know what?
Early in COVID, and weren't sure how the social graces would play out.
Well, when we first met, we met through a mutual watch collecting website, a Canadian one, CWC, Canadian Watch Collecting, right? And we were starting to do virtual get-togethers. So I was hosting these monthly virtual get-togethers, and eventually, hopefully, we will actually have in-person ones again, and then we could do a proper, half hug, half shake thing, and actually drink and meet in person.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's been 2 years now, but it's hopefully easing off.
Absolutely. And you just come back from vacation, correct?
Oh yeah. Well, we snuck away. We actually had 2 vacations, which was kind of nice because we had March break and we were away with the kids in Paris, which is always fantastic.
That is not Paris, Ontario, folks, by the way, just for clarification.
Which sounds very exotic, but we were actually looking at Florida first and pricing it out. Florida was obscene. So we actually started to look around, and it's been a while since we've been to Paris. It's one of our favorite places on earth. And it was about a third of the price for everything in. So it sounds so exotic, but we were bargain hunters and ended up in Paris, France, because Universal Studios priced us out. But that was amazing. But when you're with the kids, it's not really vacation.
So they're not in diapers though. So that's half the battle, right?
Yeah, we did March break with the kids, and then we traditionally immediately did a trip without them. So over Easter, we just extended the break, and we were in Lisbon, which is amazing.
Amazing. Wow. So it sounds like you had a great time.
Yeah, Lisbon's it's one of the best places on earth, actually. And that's an incredible bang for your buck too. Because once you're there, port is €1 a glass. And then half the time they don't even charge you for it. So and the food is amazing, and the seafood. Plus you're on the beach, you've got the coast, you've got the history, the architecture, and it's the 4th safest city in the world, which is nice because then I could wear my watches. Paris, I brought a couple under the radar watches, but I'd be terrified to wear any of the Rolex or the Audemars, which is tough because it used to be that vacation was one of the favorite things about it, is that's where you could really wear the watches more freely. And now it's with the current landscape. But Lisbon was so safe, so I was able to bring out some pieces that I enjoy wearing that I would never wear to work. So it was a big part of the vacation.
I gotta tell you, man, this is, if you look up first world problems in the dictionary, this is today's episode. Today's episode is all about first world problems. Which of my watches should I wear today? May that be our worst problem in life.
It's a hard struggle.
The struggle is very real. I can tell you, even when you stay in town, right? When you wake up in the morning, you think, okay, am I going to go to the gym? Am I going to the office? Am I going to an event afterwards? And you actually have to think about that. For me, I don't know how it starts for you. It starts off the outfit. What watch am I wearing? And how's this going to flow for me? If I have to take it off, where am I putting it? And then you build the outfit around the watch, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I kind of figured as much. Now, when we first got introduced to each other, and before I go into that, my producer always yells at me that as you're watching this, folks, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, notification bell. You're loving this episode, so you can watch more and more of The Chosen Life and our other programs. So just make sure you're doing that, please. We really appreciate the subscription. And as you're watching this, please leave your comments, leave your questions for RJ and myself. I would love to hear all about your watch comments, your watch stories, either you're onto your 10th watch or your first watch. And part of the thing with RJ and I, being on our collector website, no matter what level you're at in the collecting game, if you're just starting or you're very experienced, we're all at the same level. We love to share each other with our stories and support one another. And that's one of the great things about the watch community. So that being said, when you do purchase a watch, you're purchasing the seller as much as you're purchasing the watch itself. So I can say that as far as how RJ and I first connected was, you knew I was going to wear it.
Still got it. Yeah.
Of course I do. It's amazing how when you get a watch and you love it and you connect with it, you're wearing it all the time. Let's put it up here, right? Without the reflection, the old Omega DeVille. And when you decide, it's funny, I have another collector friend that we always talk about. We're like, when you love a watch, you just want to strap it on all day. And when you decide the watch is gone, you might as well just throw it in the garbage. I don't want to look at this thing anymore. It's hideous. Just get it out of my face. It's obviously a joke, and one person's beater watch can be another person's grail, obviously. But it's funny because as RJ and I were talking, he's like, yeah, I picked it up on my trip to, where did you pick it up again, RJ, this one?
It was Venice. And
Correct.
So the thing with that watch,
yes,
I went there, and my wife doesn't know this, but I planned the whole vacation. We did a cruise, and that was right when they introduced their boutique editions. And the first was the Venice boutique of their Aquaterra, and it's because the sea monster, the hippocampus, was inspired by the sea creature that was on the gondolas.
Yes,
and so Venice was the original one, and so we went there actually to buy that watch because I was deep and heavy into Omega. And when we were at the boutique, we saw the Venice Aquaterra. It really did nothing for me, and I saw that one, and I was instantly fell in love with it. And I thought it was just such a good, with the rose gold against the brown, and so that's the one I actually left with, even though we went for the whole purpose. That one I could have gotten in Toronto or Ross Jewelers in Hamilton, and we went to Venice for the sake of a different watch. I walked out with that one.
And you tell me the story. I go on your Instagram account, and by the way, people, if you want to see what the Chosen Life looks like, besides this man right now sipping on lightly on his scotch as he's talking, perfect hair, nice shirt, this is how we present ourselves when we live the Chosen Life. He tells me about the watch, a story. And I'm like, okay, it sounds right. And I see the receipt. You showed it to me, the booklet, right? I go on your Instagram account and I scroll down, and there's a million pictures of this watch. First of all, you matched it up with different bottles of alcohol, and how it, your photography is amazing. As an influencer, you know what you're doing, buddy. And then I see the watch in Venice, and you're taking the shots when you first picked it up. I'm like, this is so cool because I'm wearing RJ's watch and I'm wearing his story, and then I get to live that, And why did I want this watch originally? Do you remember? Did I tell you the story at the time?
No, you were big into dress watches.
As a lawyer,
and the power reserve indicator was one of those functions that you really liked on the dial.
You remember that? That's right. Yeah. Half the watches I own, I love the power reserve because I don't know, I'm obsessed with it. I like to see how much time is left, whether it's manual one or automatic. It just makes me feel good. I got the big Pilot, got to see the 7-day. It's just a lot of fun. But where it all began was watch envy. What do I mean by watch envy? I bought with my partner the exact same model, but the stainless version with the slate gray dial and the blue hands for the retiring partner at our office. And I had to sit on that watch for months, probably like 6 to 9 months because of COVID. And we're not having our banquet dinner and we can't give it to him. And finally we said, you know what? Enough's enough. We're going to have a virtual banquet. We're going to deliver food to everybody's home. We're going to send him the watch, and he's going to get the watch in this banquet virtually. So Jerry opens up the watch. Jerry loves the watch. He's all excited. The next day he pops by the office and he's wearing the watch. And I look at it on his wrist. I said, damn, I like that watch. Like I've had this watch sitting in the box. I've looked at it, but when you see it on the wrist, it's so different. Some watches, when you see them in the showcase, you love them. You put on the wrist, you hate it. Sometimes you see it in the showcase, you're like, eh, and then you see it on the wrist, it's different. When I saw it on his wrist, I said, I get it now. And of course, you had to list it on the website. You just had to be the guy with the DeVille, except yours is the two-tone with the chocolate dial. And I start messaging you, and boom, we make a deal, except that I can't make it to your area, Niagara, for close to a month. You held it for me. You're a good guy about it. Came to your home. You don't know me, but you know me off the site. And boom, the watch gets left on my wrist and the story's done. You know, it's amazing. But the reason why we pick our watches and how we connect with it, and because I knew you through the site, I've heard your name before, and then I got to meet you in your home and I got to see your collection. I said to myself, this is a pretty cool thing. So I really bought the seller as much as I bought the watch. Do you buy your watches the same way? Are you, as far as, does it matter for you where they came from who it came from?
Well, yeah. I mean, especially now online, you have to really trust, because it's crazy how comfortable you are sending thousands of dollars online, where not that long ago you'd be afraid to even put your credit card on a website on the computer.
Absolutely.
And now you just blind trust. So it can't be completely blind. So you need to make sure that you trust who's going to send, especially if it's sight unseen. But I'm not that big. I'm perfectly happy with pre-owned, you know, if it's in decent condition. And for me with collecting, it's, you know, as big as my collection is, I try not to have too much redundancy. So that DeVille, as much as I loved it, I felt it had to go, because I picked up the Langa, and you see it's very, very similar. The rose gold, so it's more of a gray, the grayish style, but it's like an earth tone gray. So it has the same wrist presence in a lot of ways. So for me, it's about the wrist presence of the watch. So if I have a watch that has a similar wrist presence, it's like you said, when you're planning what you're going to wear, I don't want to have too many watch face-offs, because if there's a face-off between two, I'm generally going to always go to one. And then it's the only time I'll move a watch if I feel it's redundant in the collection. So that dress watch, earth tone dial with the rose gold bezel, and this one's rose gold case. So they had to go to allow this one into the box.
Which is the ironic part, because I love this piece. I've enjoyed wearing it. It's gotten the most rotation since I got picked up, because it's such a good lawyer watch, honestly.
Yeah.
I love it with jeans. I love it with the suit. But for clarification, as much as I love this watch, I would trade for that piece that you just showed in a heartbeat, would not ask questions. Thank you very much, RJ. Enjoy back your DeVille. But on the other hand, and I sent you a picture of it, and we were laughing about it about a couple weeks ago, another DeVille came up on the site. It was the same one as Jerry's, with the same slate gray and with the blue hands. I couldn't resist it. Because the thing was, the guy got a custom strap. It's now he got not the croc. It's got the simple leather strap, less dressy, stainless versus two-tone. I said, you know what? This is my worst problem in life, that I own two DeVilles. I'll figure it out later. And I met the guy, and you know what? Great guy, again, from CWC, professional, does a lot of traveling. And for him, he just had too much in the collection. Something had to go. And it's funny how no matter what our professions are, when we have the same love of being watch connoisseurs, we all connect. It's just amazing how that comes to be. And I remember every single person who sold me a watch and how I connected with them.
Well, that's the thing. There's not many things in life that will instantly bond people, and watch collecting is one of them. It's amazing. It's because whatever brings you to watches, also there's other qualities about you on many different levels that also connect. So the thing that attracts us to watches, you know, just it's a visible marker of other parts of ourselves that tend to mesh well. So there's not many things that will instantly bond you. So it's one of those things that immediately and that's, like you said earlier, has nothing to do with how much you spend or what your watch budget is. It's, you know, if you love watches, you love all watches. And so you can be just as passionate about fossil collection, you know, if that's the extent of your disposable money for watches. Boy. And you get a seat at the table, because it's about the appreciation and love, and those guys who you know love their fossils or Invictas or whatever they are, they still have all the same qualities that connect us. So that's a great thing about it. It's the inclusiveness And it's ironic because a big part of the luxury market is trying to be exclusive, and the exclusivity and the Vevlinism. And yet with watch collecting, it's about inclusiveness of all of us. So one of the greatest ironies that they're trying to sell you this elite membership to a secret club, and on the collector side, where we just want everyone to come in, as opposed to the people who are wearing it just as status symbols and are buying into the fantasy as opposed to actually buying a watch.
Well, we laugh about it on the forums, right? Because the people that are watching the rap videos and watching the award shows, and they're going and they're grabbing. I had to bling up for today. I usually don't wear the chain out, but for you, buddy, I had to bling it up a little bit because I knew the game is so high right now.
There you go.
I got to come to the party. But the people that went and they're like, "Oh wow, I saw Jay-Z and he was sitting there with his Tiffany Patek, and he's wearing his Dior Jordans, and then they go off to GOAT or whatever, and they're not lovers of watches. They have no idea. They don't know how to wind it. They don't know how to take care of it. They're just doing it because that's the in thing and that's it, versus somebody that like truly appreciates the piece and loves the collection and remembers their first watch like it was yesterday, and that whole journey and the story of how it goes. And that's where I'd love to learn people's stories of where they all began. I know where I began, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But for yourself, first of all, background wise for the listeners. So your background, like I know you as Superdoc, right? That's your handle on CWC. And you are Superdoc because you are
well, I'm a doctor.
Russian.
Yeah.
Big surprise. And it's not Dr. Feelgood. It's not Dr. Feelgood. He's an actual real doctor, folks. And in your day-to-day, when you're not taking multiple vacations and sipping on scotch, what is your professional life look like, RJ?
Well, right now it's because we have a few different streams. Mm-hmm. So we've got the weight loss clinic, which is a big segment of our practice, and then just general comprehensive, family practice plus a urgent care type clinic. So it's keeping us hopping. It's where, especially the last little while with COVID, we've been busy, and the weight loss part of it is more weight loss, lifestyle, well-being, wellness, men's health. So that's a big part of the stream, and then we do just regular good old-fashioned medicine as well. So it keeps us busy, but that's where you need vices. And the super part was more is my Superman love. So that's where it's I still collect. I don't collect the comics as much anymore, but still the memorabilia, as much Superman gear as possible.
But you were watching Superman and you decided, and I met you, to be quite frank, it looks like someone took a piece of granite, chiseled it, and that's you. Like, you are, when people say, like, I'm in the best shape of my life, like, dude, you are 24/7 in the best shape of your life. And I was like so impressed because I know the journey I took, and I was not always that great and disciplined. And I'd still, I wear the shirts, to always, to inspire others to say, hey, you can start from nothing and work your way to something. And I could tell you, man, from the time I wake up to the time I go sleep, I know when I'm working out that day, if I am, what I'm eating, when I'm eating, it's a lifelong commitment and it's not a struggle. I know my routine and everything else, and I feel good about it. When I see you and I see when people meet you, they obviously are inspired. How soon in your life, how early on did you make the commitment to fitness and health, nutrition? Like, what was your path in that?
Well, it's funny because early on, you start working out to supplement hockey and for strength and as part of a training for sport. And then before too long, the hockey part wasn't really going anywhere, and I actually had less interest. So the working out became more just therapeutic in a lot of ways. And so it's a daily challenge, which is really, really exciting because no more than anywhere else, just like in life, the contest is always you against who you were yesterday. And what I loved about the training was not only was it some quiet time to yourself, it's all about setting that bar and that challenge for yourself and having a measurable, objective way to know if you're making progress. The nutrition part didn't actually come in until med school. I always say I went to med school to better my bodybuilding, because before it's all ego lifts and throwing weight around and impaired form and all that stuff, without even realizing everything else that goes into it. And then it really, as you get older, you really have to double down on the diet and the regimen and the routine, because it's amazing what you can get away with in your 20s. So you see all these guys on Instagram and YouTube in their early 20s showing their abs. Like, I had a diet of steady beer, pizza, and ramen noodles, and I had abs in my 20s. Now it's a lot harder. In your mid 40s, you've got to actually really restrict calories, count them, watch your macros, and make sure that you're logging your physical activity.
I can tell you, buddy, that when I'm in my mid 40s as well, I look at pictures of myself in my 20s. I can tell you I'm in much better shape now than I was back then. and I can dare venture that you probably could say the same thing. And I've seen pictures of you through Instagram, because I'm looking at the watches and I want to see the collection, right? And I can tell you, man, every year you're looking younger. Like, you're doing this Benjamin Button thing. And people used to call me Benjamin Button. And people tell me, how do you do that? And I'm like, it's pretty simple. You eat really well, exercise, and just don't let stuff get to you. Like, just enjoy your life, man. Like, do not go to bed happy, wake up happy, and life is a lot simpler. And guess what? You don't age if you just be happy.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what, in the last couple of years, I've gotten into fasting as well. And I found really been effective. It's a lot easier to do in the summers than the colder weather.
I've noticed that as well. Yeah. When I was doing my bodybuilding show, I did the IF, and I did it in the spring, summer, and it was much easier. But I could tell you, certainly when I go for strength and conditioning versus just cutting, life is a lot more fun that way. So and it's funny because, I think I've noticed, because I follow you're an open book. Like, if somebody watches your Instagram, like, you get to know your life, you get to see your family, you get to see what you're about. And the discipline you have in your professional life is a discipline you have in your personal life, is how you take care of yourself, is a discipline you have in your watch collecting. Like, everything you're doing, RJ, in your in alcohol, as far as understanding the connoisseur of what you consume liquid wise, and if you're doing something, you're doing it right. And that's where I want to know, when did you get into watch collecting? When did the watch bug hit you? And how did your journey get to be where you are today?
That's the tough part, because somewhere along the line, it takes on a life of its own.
Mm-hmm.
So I always kind of wore a watch. It's really the only jewelry a man can wear for the longest time, other than a giant Mr. T-like necklace.
Thank you. Yes, that is what I'm going for.
But yeah, so it was always kind of the fashion accessory for a bit. And then, and then it became this idea and this symbol of success or achievement. And somewhere along the way, something else happened. So it's one of those funny questions, because someone, why they love watches, is like asking, why do you love your wife? And what you start to do is come up with valid arguments to justify your love. So you start listing off all her good qualities, or you start listing off things that sound good, that would be a reasonable, valid reason for loving watches. And none of it really have to do with why you're in love with them. And the thing is that somewhere along the way, the nucleus of humans just lit up with dopamine when you put a watch on, and you can't really explain it because it's on a subcortical level, and it's still really hard. And the people who don't understand never will. And there's a lot of things that I couldn't possibly understand the passion for. I mean, cars do very little for me, and some people are really into so many other things.
Shocking! You're literally to everything possibly else. And because you have to have the car, because you got to go on the steering wheel with the symbol, and you got to match up the dial to the steering wheel. But that being said, okay, we're going to talk about the subject of love.
Yeah.
When did you break your watch virginity? Who was your first?
Well, the first was an Esquire in as my last year in med school, as I was starting to do the in-office rotations.
That was your first watch relationship, was the Esquire?
Was the Esquire. Yeah. It was I think $300, which at the time, it was on sale at the Bay in Ottawa, where I was in med school.
Okay.
And I had a med student line of credit, and actually so I was a bit nervous buying it, but it felt like my last year in med school and graduating, and that became that symbol. and that was the first time that the watch then became part of the image you present, because I wanted to, because at the time I had like a Timex on a plastic rubber strap that wouldn't look as well with the suit and tie. So that became part of that first symbol, and the watch taking on meaning other than just a timepiece. And then my first good watch, after practicing in private practice for a bit and getting out of debt, and then wanting to commemorate, was the Seamaster Planet Ocean, the Bond watch.
What? Okay, which one did you pick up? Do you recall?
The Seamaster Professional. So the Pierce Brosnan. What's that?
So not the mid-size, the full-size one.
The full size, yeah. So it was the automatic though. So in GoldenEye he had the quartz, and then in Tomorrow Never Dies, I think was the one where he had the automatic.
Yes.
And so that was the one I bought. But when I bought it, it was 2006, and so that was the Casino Royale, and he wore it in the final scene. And it was, but it was a used one, because at the time, still, the idea of spending that much was a bit anxiety provoking.
And that was the blue dial, blue bezel one?
Blue dial, blue bezel with the wave.
With the wave and the stainless steel. And that was 2006.
That was 2006. Yeah.
Which is amazing to me, because aging you and knowing where you're at, I would have figured you a lot earlier in the game. It's amazing. You actually came a little later in life.
Yeah, well, I was broke for the longest time.
Well,
through med school and then getting out of debt.
RJ, that does not stop most of us, my friend. We find a way. We find a way there.
Yeah, that's probably true.
It's bad. Like, and I'm kidding aside, obviously, but you know, I always tell people, if you got to go into heavy debt for it, if it's going to change your lifestyle, don't do it, please. It's not worth it. You know, if you got to choose between a car that works and doesn't work or a watch, please get the car. You know, please pay your rent. Don't do that. But you know, especially when you're younger and you're enjoying it. Like, I can tell you, like, I only owned one piece for the longest time. If I want something else, I had to sell the piece, and that's the way it was. That was my collecting forever. It was a big hill in my mind to climb to get a second piece and carry two at the same time, and then, you know, then it snowballs from there, right? But I started off in high school. I was in grade 10, and it was my brother. And I love my brother to pieces. And like, my dad died at a young age, so he was like my dad. He's like much older than me, so he's like a quasi dad. And he tells me in Israeli accent, when you go to school, you need a good watch. You got to look like a nice watch. You got to wear a proper watch. So, you know, I started the path, as a lot of when you start off your first watch, with a tag. You know, start off with the quartz tag, work our way up to the automatic tag, then work our way up to the Frankenstein 60s, 70s Rolex that the pawn shop put together. Yeah. And then work our way to the 36 Datejust. And then, like, I actually sat one day, and it took me like 3 hours to come up with all the watches and where they went and all that. But I actually made myself my spreadsheet. But it's funny, because when I look back on my collection, I look back at what I'm doing, it all comes back to my brother. It comes back to the time we spent together, him taking me shopping, teaching me about watches, the ones he liked back in the day. And everything I ended up having was stuff that he told me about, something he had, or something he always wanted. And he really set this. So he's not even into watch collecting anymore. He wears this one and he's happy. And it always says to me, why do you do this? Just wear one. And I said, you did this. This is your fault. And once you got the bug, it's really hard to stop, you know? And I mean, look, I'm talking to Mr. Watches, right? Because the Holy Grail is to be on Hodinkee. For those of you, you know, type in Hodinkee, the most popular site, magazine, whatever you want to call it. And you were a feature on Hodinkee, correct?
Yeah. Just funny, because I was not really, I never went to Hodinkee at all as far as website or for watch information.
Oh, so you were not an avid Hodinkee guy?
No.
I did not know that.
Not at all. And in fact, I was actually somewhat anti-Hodinkee, because the first
Did you tell him that?
Hodinkee, first time I was actually aware of Hodinkee was when they did that collaboration with Vacheron Constantin.
Okay.
And that upset me a lot, actually, because the way it rolled out, and Vacheron, I didn't think they would do that. And it seemed, I didn't realize at the time how much influence and power it had as a website, and how every brand really kind of bows to them. And then it was just the brands lining up to have Hodinkee special editions. And I couldn't understand why the brands would, what I felt was like, lower themselves. Why are they, you know, doing this? And so I was like, I somewhat anti-Hodinkee for a bit. And then at some of the collector events, especially Seiko, got to talk to Jack Foster and some of the other guys, and they're just really passionate about watches. And I think that what started for them was just this passion project, and it evolved into something else entirely. But so with Hodinkee, it came out because of Grand Seiko, and they were doing this thing. I think I was the fourth in line, and they were doing these features on Grand Seiko collectors, and it was from Grand Seiko themselves just wanting to show what collectors were like. And this was early on as they were starting to roll out in the US as a major brand and starting to expand. And so they reached out to me because I was on Instagram starting to collect Grand Seikos and post them more and more. And so it sounded like a fun thing to do. I saw some of the other guys do it, and production value was pretty high. But I think they had a very clear image of what they wanted to portray. I'm not sure it was exactly what completely me, because they had some very strict things about doing it, and it was done over COVID, during COVID time too. So they actually used a production company out of Toronto that would come in, but they were very clear they didn't want the Niagara Falls, they didn't want you drinking whiskey, they didn't want me in the Bentley. So there's a few things I'm not sure they had this image that they wanted to portray, even though the whole idea was to show what a Grand Seiko collector was all about. But then there was kind of a persona that they wanted to present. I think the idea they wanted to put forward as we're taught was this, because I'm incredibly focused on details and the process. And it's like you said, with bodybuilding, with everything, it's a matter of what does it take to reach that endpoint. And what I love about Seiko is the journey of Seiko and even the journey of Grand Seiko, and all the effort and the time and the overcoming the failures and the Swiss watch chronometer competitions and that resilience and everything that went into the past 60 years of Grand Seiko to make it to where they are now, and the past 150 years of Seiko to reach where they are now. And so they wanted to kind of create that story around the idea of appreciation of process. So they brought me to the vineyards to go
Remember that one, yes.
fondle grapes for a bit, and then they ended it with me drinking the wine. So I think they had this little artistic vignette in mind, yes, and kind of put me in that role. And some of the things I insisted on that made it to that feature, which yes, I was a little happier. I insisted some shots from the gym and at the clinic and whatnot, because then just showing actually who you are. But
I can tell you being featured on Hodinkee is like Tom Brady on Sports Illustrated. That's the kind of level for watch collecting. Like, it's a big deal. Like CWC was blowing up and losing its mind when you're on there. And I can tell you, I've seen the pictures, I've read the article, and I'll tell you, if that was me, man, I'd have shirts made up in color of those shots. I would get wallpaper done in my man cave of me with the funneling those grapes. It came out amazing. You looked like $1 million on there. So power to you. And now I remember when I was at your house, now correct me if I'm wrong, I recall distinctively that your wife, Michelle, was on the phone and talking about with a friend of hers that your collection was getting flown out to New York. Was that?
Yeah, that was the Hodinkee. Yeah. So
folks, let's make it clear. Yeah. RJ's Grand Seiko collection is getting picked up and flown to New York. Okay. This is what we're talking about. Like, that's a flex, man. That's amazing. And like, were you worried about your watches getting wrapped up and making it there and getting back?
So that was amazing, is because they wanted to photograph the watches and do the watch stuff in their own studio. Yes, they didn't trust the Toronto guys to do it. So they sent this clamshell traveling case with bubble wrap and everything else. And so I think at the time I had 12 Grand Seiko. And so you pack them up, and then they insure them for the market value, which is my main concern, is because at the time, like the Peacock, which I think was 8,000 Canadian, was trading at 15 or 16, and some of the other limited edition ones were, and some of those you can't get. So even replacement value is tough because
you can't get it again.
back then Seiko limited editions were 500, 600.
Yes.
Now they're 2,000 plus.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
so that was my biggest concern, was if something went wrong. And so they insured it at current market values, which at least gave you a little bit of peace of mind. And so then, yeah, they shipped them off and they cleaned them up and took photos of them and did the loop and the rotating video things. And then they sent them all back. But yeah, it was tough.
Were you
Like,
happy to be reunited with them? You felt good, like it was a
yeah,
good.
a few weeks without, and that's how you know which watches you miss. Because I've got probably over 70 watches now,
Yep.
and some that I recently moved because I haven't worn them in 2 years, and
Yeah.
so it's you realize you don't miss them, and we've got some that when we go away we put them in the safe deposit.
Of course.
I haven't gone to pick them up yet, and it's because I don't really, some of those I don't miss that much.
But it's funny, when you and I were growing up, Seiko is the Seiko that like your brother wore, that's sitting in the bottom of the drawer. That this is like a step above a calculator watch, basically. If you want to put in relatively terms of what Seiko was when we were growing up. I just came back from Miami, by the way, and you're right about yes. So I went down to South Beach, and you were 100% right. I should have gone to Paris. I should have come with you guys. Like, it's terrible out there. It's fun, but it is expensive. Wow. But I'm on the stretch there, and what do I see? The Grand Seiko store, and it's right beside
the boutique at the Design District.
Of course, and it's right beside the Rolex shop, which is the funniest thing, because you walk by the Rolex shop, right? There's a security guards, there's like 5 staff, and they're managing a store with like 3 watches in there. It's like, what point do you guys serve here? You might as well just leave one person. What are you securing exactly? So, but Grand Seiko at that level, and Hodinkee, when they do their videos and they do their photography, you think there's nice videos and nice photography in magazines and websites. They're at another level. Like, they're using like $3 million cameras. Like, when I watch their interviews with the celebrities, like, wow, their quality. So Hodinkee, I think it was pretty cool, man. And I'm glad they reached out to you, and it was a great feature and all. And part of the thing why is because, for example, you and I were about to start our discussion, and I said to you, RJ, remember, did you bring some watches for show and tell? And he goes, yeah, let me grab one of the boxes. Folks, what we're about to see is one of the boxes. When I came over to your home and you're going to go grab the box for the Omega, you left me with one of the boxes. One of these boxes is like beyond, this is like 10 people's grails. Like, please, without further ado, buddy, you brought show and tell. Let's see them. What do we got today?
Well, this one, so
we saw one of them already,
because it's eclectic. So
that's good.
This one, this is the one that like is the current rotation. So I'm not sure how well you can see.
Well, maybe we start pulling up one by one. Okay, let's see that. Okay, we can see them pretty well. Yeah. Okay, and maybe we can start pulling them out a couple one at a time. And people are drooling right now on their mouse pads seeing this.
Well, so here's the this was actually ironically the first watch I bought because I was looking for a dress watch.
Okay.
This is the Breguet Marine Big Date. This is their sports watch. and at the time, this was for me as dressy as I was willing to get.
Let's see the back of it.
What's that?
The back of it?
The back. Oh, it's got the display back and
beautiful, nice clear back. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Breguet's one of those brands. It's funny, like not a lot of mainstream people necessarily know, but the collectors love it. I love Breguet, so great choice.
If Breguet was controlled by anyone but Swatch Group, it would be in the same conversation with Patek almost every time. So these are, and right now I'm a Breguet high because I think they're so undervalued.
I agree. That's the same thing with the Suda, and it breaks my heart that the Swatch Group's dealing with them because it's such a good piece, but nobody knows because they're just focusing on Omega essentially.
Yeah, and well, Swatch Group's interesting because it's like you've got the 2 divisions there with the daughter Hayek and the son Hayek, and they've got their favorite brands, and he likes Omega a lot. Like, she's a big fan of Blancpain, and they kind of they fight amongst each other, and they've got this interesting strategy that is from Hayek Senior, where he had the wedding cake philosophy.
Yes.
Whereas none of the flavors can blend, and so when Omega, there was a time where Omega and Rolex were very tightly competing, and we were big into Omega, and so we got invited to a few of the things. And I was chatting with Stephen Urquhart. I said, like, you guys are you and Rolex are neck and neck, but what I don't understand, why aren't you everywhere that Rolex is? You've got Federer in tennis. Where's the Omega's tennis guy? And he said, no, tennis is Longines. And so they wouldn't let Swatch Group brands compete with each other. And then we were showing them old Omegas from the archives, and they had the moon phase and the day date and the dress watch. I'm like, this is a fantastic watch. Why don't you guys bring this back? And he says, no, that's Blancpain, and Blancpain has a dial very similar. So Swatch Group won't let them interact. They won't let the layers of the cake blend into each other. So they're very restricted by the heads up. Whereas something like Richemont, they will let them all just do their thing. So they don't care that JLC and Vacheron have similar designs or similar price points or are advertising in the same space. So Richemont's a little better at letting each brand do their own thing, whereas Swatch controls everything. Just look at the Moon Swatch. You can't tell me Omega was happy about that. And then, but Swatch,
it's like
Swatch
people don't
controls
realize in cars, for example, that Volkswagen owns almost every single brand, you know?
it all.
And when it comes to watches, you see all these brands and they're thinking, why is this watch competing with this watch? No, they're the same company. It does, people don't understand there's like essentially three companies that control everything. And then there's the independents. And then Rolex is just at its own level right now, obviously. But
you look at the independents, and that's where you see Rolex. I gained a lot of respect for the way they did business before things went crazy, is because when you started to see the releases and everything, and you watched Rolex sit back and do its thing, you realize they were playing the long game. And when some of the other brands like the Omega, when another conversation with Stephen Urquhart, when they first introduced the Dark Side of the Moon, and everybody was going crazy for it.
Yeah.
I said, you guys have something really special here. This is your Daytona. You've got people paying full retail for an Omega, which normally wouldn't happen. And this was at a time when, you would expect at least 20 points off an Omega if you walked into a dealer.
Yeah.
I said, now you've got people lining up for it. So what you need to do is hold it back, make people earn the right. They were rolling out their boutique model at the time to make this a boutique exclusive. Make people feel like they have to earn the right to buy this. And he's like, oh yeah, you're right. But it was a big seller. So what they did instead was they gave us 5 more of them in every color combination and every iteration. And they flooded to the market to the point where you started to see it on Joma Shop for 50% off. And I was upset by that, but I realized that he had a hell of a bonus that quarter because he had fantastic sales. And in those big conglomerates, that's what it really comes down to, is keeping the shareholders happy, meeting your quotas. Whereas Rolex, AP, Patek, they can sit back and play the long game. So they can restrict production because they don't care about next quarter.
When you say that, I think about Panerai immediately. Panerai had the secret sauce, everything for the going, and they just flushed it all. Now they're starting to make their rebound, right? Luckily enough for them. And they had such a unique product in a world of watches that so many similarities. Well, they were just a really unique one. And then they just decided, let's flood. Let's make a million special editions. Let's make every variation of it. Let's change how the quality of the product. And people that the one you're holding right now. See, it's funny. A lot of people don't know Longa, but it's consider tell us, as far as people talk about, what's the Holy Trinity, like what is in your estimation, what are the top 3?
Well, I still don't understand what AP is doing there, and I love AP, but I really don't think it belongs in that conversation. I mean, Patek, yes. And I have only the one Patek, which is the dressy Calatrava, which this is actually
is their DeVille, which is Rolex is Cellini. Everybody has the version. I
mean, this is your classic dress watch. And with the display back, this one had a very short production run. And I tend to be attracted to watches that everybody else seems to hate. So this one
But you and I have similar
because
tastes, which is pretty cool.
yeah.
That's, I told you we're watch brothers from different mothers, but
Yeah.
I appreciate where you're coming from.
This was the Calatrava, but it was at the time when the trend was to bigger watches.
Mhm.
And so this one is 38 millimeter dial and bezel. But what they did effectively was slap it on a much smaller watch's chassis. So you see
Mhm.
where the lugs actually are, and you see the size of the movement. And it's
Yes.
like this big saucer over top. So
Mhm.
they basically made a 38 millimeter watch with a 33 millimeter movement and a smaller base. So effectively, they just slapped this bigger saucer onto a smaller plate. So you see the lugs actually look really tiny
Yes.
because they were meant to fit the case over here as opposed to up here. But it makes for a really nice dress watch and a streamlined look. And so the strap is 16 millimeters
Look at
instead
the
of
deployant on that
18.
one. Like the
Yeah.
deployant, the clasp is
So
just gorgeous.
so that's where so this is my one Patek, but the finishing and the details are amazing. And when you look at some of their actual complications, they're just outstanding. And I think that it really bothers them that all anyone cares about is the Nautilus. That was meant to be their entry level introductory to the brand piece. And
Yep.
so I think that to some level, it frustrates the higher ups that all anyone wants is what they thought was their crappiest entry level affordable piece.
And if you and I
And
want to pick up a rubber strap Aquanaut, how we going to do in that one? We're going to be on a what 800-year
yeah,
waiting list,
yeah,
which
they
is
won't even
obscene.
entertain the idea.
What is it?
But so
Retail on a rubber strap Aquanaut? Retail is what 25, 30?
25. And that's the thing. I remember
Yeah.
even the Nautilus. I remember
Yeah.
leaving that at the jeweler's case so
Yep.
many times,
All the time. Yeah.
three separate times.
Yeah.
And it's because at the time I think it was like an $18,000 watch,
Mhm.
and it didn't feel like it was worth 18,000. And at the time, I think the first time I left it, I had just gotten my day date, my solid yellow gold presidential day date, and I think I paid 12,000 for it or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a $12,000 watch. There's no way this is an 18. It was flimsy and didn't really do much for me. That's why I say I didn't like it at 18. I sure as hell don't love it at 80. And the Aquanaut, same thing. I remember leaving that at 18, and now it was like 80,000 or more than that.
For rubber strap, folks.
Yeah.
Rubber strap.
For a basic 300. But Lange,
Okay.
I think, definitely belongs in the Holy Trinity. Lange is an interesting brand right now. This is I only have two. I have this one in the time zone.
Okay.
But the
Only
finishing,
two.
the
Only
detail,
two.
yeah.
Yes.
The finishing and the details are amazing. And Lange right now, what's interesting is this has the micro rotor. It's their automatic Saxonia. But
Everybody thinks
nobody
it's all
has-
Swiss. It's all Swiss watches, right? Lange.
No, this Lange is German, yeah.
Right. So,
So
and they're considered one of the tops, and they're not a Swiss brand.
no,
blows
and
a lot of people's minds.
they're part of Richemont Group.
Mhm.
But what's going on with Lange right now is that
Tell
their
us.
production is legitimately low and slow. And they hand finish everything in the movement after it's assembled, and they test it and it's accurate and it passes their tests. Then they deassemble it and reassemble again. And each person's finishing is a little bit unique. So you know who finished the movement based on some of the finishing and the guilloche. And so they have a really slow production. And the problem they're facing now is as demand ramps up and they're starting to gain attention, they just can't keep up with production. And so now you're starting to see these kind of go up a bit on the secondary because nobody wants to wait. no one has the patience to wait. They just all want it now. But Lange is amazing.
I would agree with you as well. I mean, I would say the most quote unquote experts will say Patek, AP, and Vacheron are the three. But I agree with you that Lange has to be in that conversation.
Yeah, Vacheron I really like. But there's another brand too that it's
highly underrated.
It's all become about the overseas. And some of the Vacheron, their complications, their world timers, they're amazing. That's the Samurai Lion. So that's the big, heavy Grand Seiko.
That's the big Grand Seiko. That's not Daytona, folks. You're looking at. You'd think it is. It is not.
No,
It's a
this is
Grand
a
Seiko.
massive, heavy watch. I love this watch.
It looks heavy.
Yeah, it's a statement piece. It's their lion's claw case, but this one has so many different points of light, and with their polishing, you've got the mirrored Zaratsu polish against the brush. So this one shines, and then the dial is textured. It's their lion's mane dial.
This is when you're gonna go chop trees and you're gonna do some bench. Then you're gonna go put that watch on.
It's a GMT chronograph spring drive. There's so many functions that I've never used. Let's see. Oh, there's the Panerai.
There's the Panerai. Okay.
Submersible. You have to have one Panerai.
I've never had
actually,
one.
I always said I've never had more than one because they're so similar.
Yeah.
So I have this one, and I have the Lumina Marina, which actually do have a very different wrist presence. So the Lumina Marina is like their dress watch by comparison. Yes.
Don't hate me, but I really want a Radomir. That's without the crown guard. I like the Radomirs, like, you know, and it's one of those things. To me, Panerai with that crown guard is like a Breitling, like the style of the bracelet. You either love it or you hate it, you know? It's kind of like when I do the whole comparison of the biggies, you're either an AP guy or you're a Patek guy. Generally, you're not both. You favor one or the other, the same way you like the Stones or you like the Beatles. If you're picking AP or Patek, you're picking Patek, correct?
It depends. So
Depends on the model.
The Royal Oak, right?
Yeah.
I have 3 Royal Oaks.
But, oh wow! Okay.
I don't see them as horology. I don't see them as near the same level. And even, you know, they've got some minute repeaters and they've got their tourbillon, but they just stuff it in the Royal Oak case. And so for me, the beauty of Patek is the variability in their case design and their models, and yet they're still all on that amazing level. So you look at their perpetual calendars and their minute repeaters, and they're very different than their sports watches and their Nautilus. You know, as opposed to AP just keeps stuffing everything into the Royal Oak case.
Yes.
And other than the code, which I don't mind the code, but again, I would be all in on the code if it was 18,000, but at 30 and change, it's just there's so much better watches for that price range.
It's funny when we talk in CWC and we go on the forums, right? And then we come on and we do the virtual talks. I remember, like, I love watches. I study them, but I still feel like such an amateur because, like, oh, I like the 1197 case. No, I prefer the 270. I'm like, like I'm sorry, I don't memorize the stuff, and people take it that seriously. Like the width. This one went by 1 millimeter. Like, wow, like this is how intense people are. Tell it. What's the other one we got holding there?
Well, yeah, that's why I said when you go to like some of the watch meetups, it's like, you know, if you're a Star Trek fan. And I was like, yeah, I like Star Trek. I watched Next Generation. I watched the movies. I'm a Trekkie. I know some of the characters. Then you go to some of these things and people are speaking Klingon to each other.
Yeah,
like you're in a completely different zone. But yeah, I get a lot of that. Especially Grand Seiko guys are some of the worst. And it's like, oh yeah, that's the SBG 6212. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, like if you're gonna learn anything when you're starting off, in-house movement versus ETA. Go research that ETA. Go learn up ETA, in-house movements, and look at all those debates on your brand and have fun with that. There's gonna be forums till the end of time on that. Yeah,
you'll be up all night. So that's the Globemaster.
Oh yeah.
So this one,
seen a few iterations of that one. That one's a very. It doesn't have all the worlds and countries in there.
Yeah, so this was the original at the first launch.
Yes.
And so this one I love. I just that classic dress watch, but the fluted bezel, which they get upset if you call it a fluted bezel.
Because the bezel looks very familiar to me. Yeah, it looks like
it's a coin bezel that goes back to the.
And is that a rubber strap or a leather strap on that one?
Has nothing to do with Rolex Datejust. No, it's leather strap, and it's got the platinum stitching.
Ah, nice.
And so the interesting story about this one, this is number 007 because it was limited to 352.
Of course it is. Yes.
And so this is 007. But I was I saw this when they introduced it at Baselworld.
Yes.
And I loved it, and I said I wanted it, and I said I want number 007, and that had to be approved by Reynold Eshelman at the time, was vice president. And so he approved me 007. And then we were in Switzerland for the Crown Montana, and we went to the factory, and they were starting to come off. Now they
You were at the
weren't yet-
Omega factory.
the Omega factory, yeah, and they weren't yet producing this.
Yes.
And Greg Kisling at the time, who's their designer, brilliant, and he still had a design there. So anything that's been coming out, all these new models and designs, it's all Greg, and he's an absolute genius. But he took me aside and he said, we've decided we're going to add the date window to this model. So all the Globemasters have a date at 6 o'clock, and that was part of the new 8800 movement or whatever it was. And the thing is, they have a steel model that now with the date looks almost identical.
Yes.
And so it was me and one other collector at the time. He got number one, and he was like a big time collector who gets number one of every limited edition. So he has a lot more power than I do. Okay. And I said, well, how do you feel about that? And he's like, I don't care that much. And I spent the night trying to convince him why this should not have a date. And then he came on board, and we submitted a letter to Stephen Urquhart about how the platinum should remain without a date. And then a few weeks later, we get an email saying we've reconsidered, and we're going to make this a dateless model. So what I've always wondered is if there's a date wheel somewhere under there spinning around.
But the casing is a platinum. It is a platinum.
It's platinum, yeah.
It's not just platinum stitching. It's a platinum watch.
It's a platinum case, yeah, yes. and it's got the enamel medallion and yes. the gold rotor, but the bezel is white gold, because as Rolex will tell you, up until last year, it's very hard to make platinum fluted, because it's a very difficult hard metal to work with.
We will talk about shortly. Yes.
Yeah, that's why historically the platinum day date has always been smooth bezel. So
it's like, you know how I pull out pens in my office when we're about to go signing? This is how he's pulling. Oh, by the way, this is the longa, and this is the day date, and this is the Omega, and this is the one that the president got me, the 007. So I gotta ask you a question now, because I've watched John Mayer interviews, and then I gotta know, because I know he's been taken to the factory, and then they've just customized them and created watches on the whim of what he wanted. Did you ever have one of those made up for you?
No, but we got a little bit into the conversation, because the other collector there absolutely was, and he wanted a minute repeater, and I'm not sure where that is in production right now, because he was a big Patek guy.
Yes,
and it's funny because he had Patek, and he was deep into Patek, and just had this soft spot for Omega. So you're talking about like billionaire type wealth, and so that's why every limited edition that comes out, he gets number one of. And so they were talking about that, and then I was talking about other models that I would like to see, and they said, oh, well, we could potentially have you meet Mr. Hayek, and then never happened. But
just to be clear,
so they do that.
But to be clear, like, for example, like you read about these collectors, and Spilly J on CWC, you picked up the longa from him, I believe, right?
Yeah.
He gets these watches. All of a sudden, he'll have this $250,000 Patek that the person customized with a different dial. So you got the original dial and you got the custom dial. To be clear, for somebody to come to Patek, and first of all, just to get Pateks in general is very difficult, the popular ones. Somebody is customizing their own Pateks. What kind of dollars are these people spending on? Like, we're now in the not just hundreds of thousands, right? Like, we could be now in the millions easily, correct?
Oh, easily. Yeah.
So to be clear, if we're going to talk about levels, because everything's levels, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about levels of watch collecting. John Mayer's going to the factory, getting his own watches. There's John Mayer, there's RJ, and there's me. I'm down here. Hey, I got my DeVille. What's going on? But it's funny because no matter where you are in the game, you can always find somebody just a little more. Like you're saying 70 watches. Like, most people can't fathom that. But it's like DJ Khaled with his shoes. I'm sure there's people that got 700 watches. Like, it never ends.
But the thing is now, so some of those hardcore Patek collectors are now really, really upset, because a guy like this guy, now they won't even return his calls, and he spent millions of dollars with Patek, and it's because Leonardo DiCaprio wants that Nautilus or Jay-Z. So now it's not only how much money can you spend, is what can you do for the brand.
Yes.
And no one cares that this 70-year-old guy, billionaire, is going to wear his Patek in his home,
amazing,
in his home suite or on his yacht. They want to see it out there on the wrists of celebrities, and so that's where it's become more this this whole other world of trying to sell a lifestyle idea.
Yes.
You just wonder who they're selling it to, because no one can buy the watches. So yeah, it's unless it's part of a, they know that in the long run production will meet demand and they'll have to sell to someone.
Without getting too deep into it, but just the curiosity, the retailers, the manufacturers, the connections you've built up, it sounds like you've built up a quite extensive network for yourself. Do you find now less people are taking your phone calls than they used to? Has the game changed for you?
Oh yeah. And the hard part is there's a lot of turnover too. And so, part of with Omega, when Stephen Urquhart left, and the new presidents come in and the new staff come in and the boutique managers leave. And so it's tough in that way, because the people you really form relationships with are now at Christian Dior selling handbags. And so there's so much turnover. And
they don't give the client list and say, by the way, this is RJ, make sure you take his call. You're starting from scratch then in that case.
Well, a little bit, but then it's also that some of the joy of the watch was the relationship with the person you were buying from. And even at the higher level. But then also now that watches have taken on this completely different power and life force, the collectors are no longer the priority, if they ever were, but the brands no longer seem to care about the collectors at all. So they care about the heavy influencers and the celebrities, and then just pushing as many pieces to market as possible. So that's what's really strange, and it's changed dramatically. It's all about the
image, but beyond image already. Now it's about it's again, like you're saying, like it's stature. It's not just how much money you have, but who you are and how you can influence somebody seeing it, your brand on their wrist. And a stupid question maybe, but and I think from the watch collector's side, we've all said this at some point, but did you ever come to a point where you said to yourself, you know what, I've done it, I've had it, you know what, screw this, I'm going to sell off the collection, I'm going to keep one or two pieces, and I'm going to call it a day, I've had my fun, now I'm going to go off to the sunset and do other things? Has that thought reached your mind? And how close?
Once a week.
Once a
every
week.
Once a week. Well, it's funny. Every so often, I wonder what the hell I'm doing. But it's really, I made my New Year's resolution was to only buy one or two pieces this year that would be significant pieces, and I've already.
I remember you already broke that. You said it's going to be about quality, not quantity. So you're just going to say bigger grails, and things change. But what stops you every time? Have you?
That's the thing. You find a piece that a deal comes up, or an offer shows up, or it presents itself, or they introduce a new piece.
Yes.
So it's really easy for those impulse buys, but I think that at some point it will happen. The tough part is right now I really love my collection. Yes. There's very few, some that I might see moving out if something else comes along. So I'm pretty content right now with how things are. But when you think about the romanticism and emotion around watches, and you think about at some point you're going to pass these on, you want it to be something more meaningful. So when you think about some of the watches that I've gotten from patients after they've passed on, that the family wanted me to have, those are watches that every time I saw that guy, that was on his wrist, and it was part of his identity. And so when you think about passing on a watch, I don't want my son to have a watch saying, yeah, this was one of 70. I don't think he ever wore it. It's in new old stock condition. So at some point, they'll boil it down to a handful that will kind of be the defining pieces of who I am, so that when they get passed on, they'll have some scratches and dents and DNA on them. Because it's my father's watch is a much more meaningful idea than one of his 70 watches that I don't recall ever seeing him wear. So at some point it'll have to boil down.
Besides wearing my RJ watch, I have a 78 Datejust that was somebody's wedding gift. And it was up on against CWC, and the guy told me the whole story and sent me a picture, and it's like, and I said to him, you got the watch, the bracelet sent off to the bracelet magician in Hong Kong, and then you got the watch service in Rolex. You spent so much money on this watch. Why would you let it go? And he goes, you know what? Got another watch that the son bought. So the son now buys him the exact same watch, but it's a newer model, and it's just sitting and nobody's wearing it. And might as well have somebody else enjoy it. But like, I'm wearing the guy's engagement watch. You know what? That has some meaning to me, so I enjoy that. You know? Again, it's about the stories. It's about the stories.
And they'll live on forever too. So there's a little bit of immortality.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Whenever I pull out some of those old vintage pieces, that person's spirit is then walking with me that day. And so it is a bit of immortality, because you think about them when you might not have otherwise.
If there's one piece of advice that I can give to a watch collector, having been there, and I believe I made this mistake, is keep your first. Like, I know, especially if you don't have the money and you're saying, you know what, I got to trade up and everything else, but you will regret it. I guarantee you, if any kind of money, you will always want back your first real watch. Like, not a watch. Okay, there's timepiece and there's watch. Your first timepiece, please keep it. Trust me, you'll be happy you did. Now, jumping into the meat and potatoes of this, that and you would, I assume you would agree with that as well.
Oh yeah.
So we've actually talked a lot about your collection today, but we are going to have to jump into one big topic, is the new releases for 2022. And one of the things you mentioned was Baselworld, which no longer exists. Did you ever go to Baselworld, the big watch yearly expo? You never actually went live to it.
No, I was supposed to go the first year of COVID.
But you were going to go.
Yeah. So, we were planning to go. But,
imagine Baselworld, it was basically like Disneyland on steroids for watches, right?
Yeah. Apparently, though, unless you had a press pass or were a jeweler, it wasn't very great for the watch lovers or collectors. You're basically stuck behind glass just looking at displays. The Watches and Wonders apparently was a whole lot better.
So this is the show that graduated from Baselworld, right? This was the first year of Watches and Wonders. This was 2022.
This was first year of live, because Basel kind of died even a little bit before COVID, and then COVID just kind of put the final nail in the coffin. And then Watches and Wonders was born as a more grand expo in Geneva, which makes a whole lot more sense, because Basel is a tiny little town in Switzerland with like a few crappy hotels that they always charge 10 times the normal rate for during Basel. And it was a struggle to find a room, and you had to take a train in there. But so Geneva, much better, more accessible. And apparently it was a lot more, consumer and watch lover friendly.
Any of the big brands, as far as you can recall off the top of your head, that said, you know what, we're going to do our own thing, we're not coming to Watches and Wonders? Do you recall who's not part of the show?
No, who did? I mean, because SIHH branched off again, and I thought for the longest time they were going to be part of Watches and Wonders, because Richemont always does their own thing, but I think this year they joined, and AP did their own thing. Omega did their own thing. They were Omega Days this year, which I thought was interesting, but it also gave them a chance to beat a lot of the other brands to the punch. And then they introduced a new watch during Watches and Wonders anyway. So, but I thought I liked Omega's new models this year.
Yes.
But when you saw them up next to the Rolex ones, it was a little, it was a bit much.
Well, everybody always wants to talk Rolexes all day long. And just to be clear, when RJ and I were growing up, you could have bought Hulk submarines all day long if you wanted to. And I remember looking at the Candy Crush Daytona and saying, so ugly, it's good. You know what? If I had the money, and I should have like, I don't know, like sold a kidney and got it, but no, I shouldn't have. But in all seriousness, though, back in the day, and this was forever, from the time I was born to literally now, it's been a lot of years. You could have gone to any retailer. You're going to get your percentage off, no tax, call it a day. It was not that difficult. The game has only changed recently. Now everybody thinks it's going to be like this forever. We'll see what happens. but we got these releases, which you can go to the store and you can go drool over and you're never going to get anyways. But what did you think of the new releases? What excited you from Rolex?
Nothing really from Rolex excited me. But I thought the right-handed or left-handed or however you would consider it,
the left-handed GMT,
it was a
Starbucks,
surprising move.
Yeah.
But and so you can't question the genius of Rolex because they're always thinking 20 steps ahead.
Sure.
And you just wonder where they're going with that model, and if it's a way to double production. I'm sure that'll come out in the Pepsi bezel and the other variants. But you just wonder where that came from and what motivated it. Because had they just slapped a green and black bezel on the regular GMT, it would have been the most popular watch in the world. So this actually created a bit of controversy, and you just wonder, was there that much demand for this type of watches, or are they laying the groundwork for something else? Last year when they introduced the Pepsi on the Oyster and brought back the Oyster for their black and blue bezel.
That's the bracelets, by the way, people, just so you know.
What's that?
The different bracelets. So like all of a sudden they have this style bracelet, that style bracelet, the solid one, the fluted one versus the Oyster.
But I thought that was a calculated measure to try to cool the market a bit, because now you've got, all you have to do is create more bracelets, and when they retired the Oyster bracelet on the Batman, it went up a bit because people thought they could never have it again.
And now they'll sell it to you, right? Which blew my mind. Okay, so you're no longer having a Batman Oyster. Now you're only getting the Jubilee. Okay, that's the Batgirl. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, it's back. Were you a Simpsons fan growing up?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Still. Do you remember the Malibu Stacy episode?
Oh yeah. She's got a new hat and people go crazy.
Right, because you have Malibu Stacy, who's like the Barbie doll. And all of a sudden they bring out the most sophisticated doll, and she talks and does this, and she's going to destroy Malibu Stacy. What are we going to do? We got to think about this all night. And then everybody's going to go run for the new doll. Wait a minute. She's got a new hat.
She's got a new hat.
And you can bring out this watch. It's got a tourbillon. It's got a power reserve. Okay, we're changing the color of the bezel. And like Rolex, to me, it's like you're doing the same stuff over and over, just changing the bracelet, changing the dial, changing this. We're gonna put some stones on it, but you're not mechanically improving it. Like it's like you're doing all that in Tudor, but very few innovations ever come to Rolex. But it doesn't matter because it's still Rolex.
But which is also part of the brilliance of the strategy, is because that your date just from 1980 looks a lot like your date just from 2020. Absolutely. And that timelessness is a big part of it. One of the things that started to drive me away from Omega was the fact that every year they replaced last year's models. And so where's the timelessness? If you're going to render, it's not like an iPhone where next year it renders your model obsolete. And so it started to bother you because they sell it as the greatest watch and timeless and all that emotion. And then, oh, by the way, we've improved it. And now it's old news. Whereas Rolex never does that. So you wonder if this left-handed thing was an effort to respond to some of the criticism about how they don't change much of anything, or if, like I said, they've got a bigger plan in mind for a whole left-handed GMT division, or what their long-term strategy is. But I think Rolex always playing the long game. The fluted bezel on the date was interesting too, and according to Rolex, it's always a matter of, if they haven't done something before, it's because they didn't have the technology or the capabilities.
Like making a two-tone ceramic bezel, for example. That was a big innovation. Yes.
Yeah. And even putting the Cyclops on the Sea Dweller, because if you believe them, they weren't able to make the Cyclops stick at the depths to which the Sea Dweller could descend. And then when they had the ability and the capability to create an epoxy that would withstand that type of depth, then they did it. And so with the platinum day-date, it wasn't just a signature aesthetic that made it platinum, although that's what it became. now when they were able to manufacture platinum into a fluted bezel, they did it, which we all, anytime there's a change, there's stages of grief. And so for me, the platinum smooth bezel was part of that signature.
Wait, can we see it again,
that
please?
I liked. But
I wore the shirt color, by the way, to match your watch. Just so you can see it.
But so that was part of the aesthetic that I like. But ironically, when I
is that a 36? That's a 36, right?
That's the 36, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Which is like a really good size. But
it was the size forever, and there's a reason why, because it fits under the cuff perfect. Yeah.
But when I first were looking at them, I was disappointed that the platinum didn't have fluted, because I love the fluted bezel.
Yeah.
But so now that it's available, I mean, if I was starting over, I would absolutely jump at the chance for that.
Me too, absolutely. And it's funny how you grow up with this, but it's funny how many people are, why would I wear that watch? It looks like white gold. How would anybody know? Because I know the color of that dial. I know that beautiful blue on the Daytona. I know it on the day date. And that's where also I always joke around. So is this the year they're coming out with the stainless steel day date? And everybody just like, yeah, that's all happening.
Yeah.
No,
but I never thought they'd do a stainless steel sky dweller. And that's a funny thing with the market trend at the time, because that was during a bit of a downturn. And I think that they needed to do something to actually drive sales. And
yeah, because it was sitting in showcases forever.
Oh, yeah.
The precious metal ones, it wasn't moving at all. And as soon as they came out with the stainless steel, and now everybody wants them. Yeah. How long were precious metal Daytonas sitting in showcases?
Oh, yeah.
All day long, especially on a leather strap or the flex. You could have bought that all day long, two tones all day long, as many as you want.
Even the platinum, I think Ross Ashley had to stage a theft in order to get rid of his platinum. But
so on that token, But then what do you think?
I remember the platinum day date, them trying to be very aggressive at discounting and turning it down at 50, and now it sells for like 200 plus. But
if we could have gone and bought Candy Crush Daytonas, we'd be right. If we would have bought everybody's inventory somehow, you'd be laughing. But hindsight's 2020. But then I give the example of the new one, the Yachtmaster, the diamond and sapphires.
Yeah.
Is that something? Could you see yourself wearing that? Do you like it?
No. And overall, I think the Yachtmaster is a very underrated watch. And for the longest time, even when things were starting to get crazy, Yachtmasters were still in the case, which I could never understand, because I thought it was a much better looking watch than the Submariner.
I love the Yachtmaster. The Yachtmaster 2, unless you live in Miami and you're going on a yacht, that's probably not the watch for you.
Yeah, right? I briefly had that one.
You did,
I had that in the two-tone, which I liked. My wife hated it.
Yes.
So I had to get rid of it.
Well, if she don't like it, it's not staying.
Yeah. But then the only watch that she really took issues with, I think, because it reminded her a bit of that big douchebag type watch.
Sorry, 1 second. No. But even like the Air King, for example. Oh, the Air King is revolutionary now. Now we changed how the crown guard is, and we changed the clasp. Woo. And now, and I read on the forum, like there's like 200 comments debating the clasp on an Air King. I mean, come on, folks, like seriously. But Rolex creates this kind of emotion out of people, and everybody cares about every little detail, right? As far as date, as far as the window goes, the symbol, whether on the Batman. There's the little symbol at the bottom, or there's not. Everybody notices every little detail, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing with Rolex guys. I mean, there's two kinds of Rolex guys. There's some who know a lot about watches, and then others who know absolutely nothing about watches. And then there's some guys who know a lot, but just about Rolex. So they're just totally into Rolex, but not into watches. And it's amazing. They're just fanboys of that one brand. But as far as watches and wonders, the brand that consistently impresses me is Gigi Lecoutre. Call it Gigi because I was in the boutique at Yorkdale, and the boutique manager kept and the whole time I'm calling it Jaeger, and it's like, I don't.
Everybody calls it
Jaeger. Yeah, I don't have a Jaeger yet, and I since added the Reverso tribute, but. So I was looking at it, I was like, I really don't have a Jaeger, but I feel like if I was going to, it would have to be the tribute because it's such an iconic And she goes on about, oh, I can't believe, do you know Gigi well? Who the fuck, who is Gigi? And he's like, do you know Gigi? And I was like, oh, and Gigi does this and Gigi does that. And I was like, who's Gigi? It's like, is Gigi in the back? Like, is he gonna come out? And it's like, oh, Gigi Lacoutre. That's so I don't know. I still call it Jaeger, but
we all call it Jaeger. I did not know it was Gigi.
Apparently it's Gigi. Jeez, but they are consistently putting out amazing watches that I don't know if anyone will ever buy, but some of them belong just in watch museums and on display. They're really just showing off what it means to be a watchmaker. And very few brands are doing that right now, because so many are just focused on trying to create a stunt watch or a big PR or drive some hype or some press or limited edition. And Jaeger just keeps putting out amazing pieces of horology that is so impressive.
Cartier is getting a lot of good press, a lot. I see them a lot. Hermes, I sent you one the other day.
Oh yeah, that I love, but the pricing metrics are pretty interesting, because the platinum is only like 28 or something like that, and the titanium one is not that much less.
Yes,
but I think that the movement and
28,000 folks, only 28,000. Yeah. That's and why we're saying only, because Rolex, you know, even at retail, you're like 80, 90 on some of the pieces, right? Yeah. And then you're paying 150. Yeah. So it's all relative levels again. But yeah, go on.
And for like a novel movement and the way they display the time zone with the sphere rotating around the dial, I think that's brilliant.
Beautiful looking watch. I just don't know resale what I'm able to do on it. You know, and that's where again you have the collectors that wear it that don't care what the resale is. When the market's going crazy for the last couple of years, they're saying, you know what, I'm not selling up my collection. I don't care if it's worth. It's like stock market. I don't care if it's here or here. I love my pieces. They make me happy the same way. Whereas other people only want it when it's hyped, and when the people don't want it, they want to get rid of it. So it's funny how collectors work that way.
Yeah, if you get that MS watch though, then you'll probably get a Birkin. So whatever you lose on the watch, you'll make up for on the purse.
Again, levels.
The same argument I get. What?
Again, it's levels. I can tell you in Miami, I've never. Las Vegas, I know how many Rolex stores there are, but in Miami, the number of people wearing Rolexes and the number of Rolls Royces. Okay. Yeah. It's incredible. I've never seen so many Rolls Royces. And I've been to New York, I've been to LA, but Miami, and it's the ones where the symbol actually pops out. It's the blacked out, like it's the real McCoy, you know. So again, all about levels. Wrapping up today, RJ. I know you're a busy guy, and again, thank you. It took us a while to put this together, I know, and you're a busy guy traveling the world, and I really appreciate it, and the audience appreciates you giving the time today, because it's a lot of people love watches, want to get into watch collecting, love to hear the stories. So, you know, it's really good of you to put that information out there. Knowing what you know, you've been in the game long enough, you've experienced, you've been in the factories, you know, we're really in uncharted times right now. Like this is like the real estate market, stock market. People are saying, when's the crash coming? What's happening? You know, this doesn't make any sense. So tell me, my friend, when you look at where we are today, where we're going today, the two things that come to mind. Let's start off. Number one, prices. Now, I know that a lot of the brands, they still are stable. You can still get your deals out there. It's only select ones. Like the media puts it out there, but there's a lot of great pieces you can pick up there and great deals if you don't have to have the must-get Rolex, right? Or the must-get Patek, for example. But on those pieces that everybody is driven in their minds that they have to receive, where do you see prices going? Is it going to soften? Is it going to go up?
Yeah, I can't see this sustained, because whenever the price is that far detached from intrinsic value, something's got to give. And you know, I just keep thinking Beanie Babies all over again, and everyone, even then, we're saying, oh, it's different this time. And they're saying that now. The only thing that might keep this going a bit longer is the way we get our information now is very interesting, because before Beanie Babies, you were limited in the news feed from 6 channels, or the newspaper, or Beanie Baby magazine, or whatever it was. So you weren't completely inundated. Now with social media and your feeds, you get fed what you're going to see, and it tailors it so that there's not another headline that can bump Beanie Babies from the front page, because all you'll get is the watches. And so even though all this other things are going on in the world, there's the front page is always going to be fed to you based on what you've tailored it. So the one thing that might keep this going on longer, although hopefully it changes as people get out into the real world, because for 2 years we were stuck dependent on that virtual world. So it's going to keep going as long as no one looks outside of their silo. And so it might keep going because people's only reality is what they think is out there. And in their mind, the reality is that everybody is sporting a Daytona and everyone is driving a Lamborghini. And it's because everyone they see is doing that on social media feed or YouTube or all these things. So they get this very skewed sense of reality. And so until they go out into the real world, which hopefully we'll more and more see, they'll get a sense of fantasy versus reality and see that these hype watches aren't really the end point of the universe. So I think,
yeah, you think it could go that route. And I have a couple of factors maybe I could throw in for you to think about if it's gonna, and if you think this is gonna affect it. Like number one, during the last 2 years or so, when people are making, we're still making incomes. The ones that were making still income. Some people made very good incomes, off of what had happened, and because obviously a lot of people lost their businesses, lost their jobs, but there were the segment of the population that did very well for whatever reason. But they also were not traveling. They were not eating out of restaurants. They couldn't go to the malls. They weren't buying as much as they were. Not all of them were shopping online. So what are we going to do? We're going to feed the watches, feed the cars, for example. All of a sudden now we're traveling again, and we're going to restaurants again, and we're going to the mall again. Is that money maybe going to take away where all of a sudden, you know what, I'm not going to buy my 6th Rolex, or maybe not going to buy a Rolex at all? Do you think that could affect it at all?
Well, I think, yeah, that'll definitely affect it because you're right. The vacation fund became the watch fund. And then there was a supply and demand issue because supply was legitimately slow during COVID and factory shutdowns.
Yes.
And I think that'll factor in. I think the speculators will start to step out, because the same thing will happen in the real estate market as well. There's a lot of buyers in the watch market that are purely speculators that are looking for the quick flip. And some of those guys took out lines of credit or credit card and took advantage of low interest rates. And so now that the cost of carrying stock or holding stock is going to go up, some of these guys are going to have to sell off, and they'll be happy with a $1,000 profit instead of the $5,000 profit. So I think a lot of those guys who are on the wait lists will take themselves off or no longer want to be on it. And I think it'll be a quick decline. The minute you'll start to see a fault in the line, things will start to rapidly turn into a bit of a floodgate. Unless the ones holding stock have enough power to keep those sell-offs under control, either by buying them up or not letting them hit the mainstream or the consciousness. Because when you look at with Beanie Babies, all it took was one eBay listing to start to crumble the whole house of cards. So stuff like that starts to happen. I think that it'll cause a big sell-off. So I think a lot of those stocks, the watch stock, are not on the wrists of the end consumer.
Absolutely not. I mean, it's a gray market is ruling it, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And as far as all the games that people are saying, you have to go buy X number of product from the jeweler, of non-desirable product for one of the desirable items, and how they're flipping it themselves. There's a whole lot of speculation there. Where I see, RJ, when we go to number 2, is the supply chain. And I'll give you the example of GM, for example, where I read one of the interviews with one of the high up executives, and they said, look, the days of you seeing a huge lot full of inventory and then mass sell-offs is over. We're not going to be carrying that kind of inventory anymore. We got smart. We're going to make more made to order. You're going to have to order online. You're going to have to wait for your product. And it's just-in-time inventory. That's where it's headed. And without staying with a whole bunch of inventory, then guess what? The prices can stabilize. Like I think, again, to The Simpsons, when Homer wanted to buy a product and called it online and said, hey, do you have any more of these left? And you see a whole warehouse full of them. Yeah, I got one more, buddy. And even Rolex, the way I see it, if I think they're smart enough now to realize we're never going to see showcases full anymore. They're going to hold it in the back, maybe put a few pieces. Maybe I can get you. Call back in a week. And they'll be. It's a game. Like honestly, perception is reality, and I think that eventually the supply will catch up to the demand. But I don't know if they're ever going to start flooding again, quote unquote flooding, and seeing like when we're talking about Omega, when they're saying all of a sudden, here's 5 variations and here's as many as you want. I think Rolex is too smart for that. and they're
Yeah.
not going to let that happen.
Well, that's part of, the whole Veblen theory, and to be a Veblen item, it would have to be something difficult to obtain.
Yes.
And for the longest time, the price alone was the barrier to entry, and the price became what made it difficult to obtain.
Yes.
And it's like you said, all of a sudden, especially in the last couple of years, money was cheap. You could borrow it, and the price became less and less of a barrier. And there was a lot of overnight millionaires and Bitcoin millionaires and house flippers, or people taking massive equity out of their house because the house they bought for 100,000 is now worth 800,000. So they remortgage and put 500K in their bank account. So all of a sudden, money was no longer what made it difficult, because then everybody had money. So something else had to create a new barrier to make that desirable. And so the difficulty in obtaining it became its Veblen signature, and why it maintained Veblen status was that it was difficult to obtain, not necessarily expensive, because people would get much more excited about a steel Pepsi than they did about precious metal Daytonas at the time. And so I think that strategy of having to earn the right, or the fact that not everybody can get it, and that's something that Hermes has been doing for decades, and has worked brilliantly for them.
And there's still wait lists. They're still not getting those bags.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No matter how many billions
much
you're
easier
worth
to produce and make, and worth much less than its MSRP and its black market value or gray market value. And so I think that they know how to play the Veblen game, because what makes it desirable is the difficulty to obtain. And if it's just a matter of handing over some cash, that doesn't make it difficult.
Because let's speak frankly, if Rolex went and across the board multiplied their prices by 50% to 100%, they're selling out the exact same way. So, you have a date that back in the day was, oh, wow, that's 40,000. That's a lot of money. Well, hold on. Here's this Patek that's 80, 90,000. Wow, that date's actually looking pretty good right now, And people are kind of waking up saying, wow, Rolex is actually really cheap. Like, oh my God, retailer, thank you for taking my full money plus tax. Thank you for the privilege of buying your product at full price. It's been unheard of for so many years. And that's where I don't see it changing. But you're right. And if you think about Hermes, it's not much different that way. So people are waiting.
Tough part, Oh, the other like you say, you go to Miami, all you see is Rolexes. When we were in Europe, it was a lot of the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so when you get out into the real world and everyone has one, there's less of that Veblen special feeling about it. And so I think that the more saturated the market gets, because remember, they still make 1 million watches a year, and they have for decades. So the minute people start to get away from social media feeds and into the real world, I think that the perception will start to shift a little bit. I think that there's still so much demand. I mean, Rolex has done an amazing job of infiltrating the consciousness of every consumer in the world, and making it so that there's no other way to celebrate an achievement than by getting a Rolex. And I went through that same road. I call it the requisite Rolex road of any collector.
Everybody has.
And then you leave the Rolex, and then you come back to it because you appreciate it on a different level, because it's less about the achievement status and symbolism. And then you come back to just appreciating how brilliant they are in the watch world. And really, the movements are incredibly solid and bulletproof and robust. And something like the Sky Dweller doesn't get nearly enough credit for being a dual time annual calendar. And that's a brilliant movement, but all anyone cares about is the logo on the dial.
Half the owners don't even realize that the bezel moves. Like, let's be honest. Last question of the day. What's on your wrist today?
Oh, this is the Speedmaster, which is
that's
so
the
funny.
Speedy.
Yeah, because and just a plain Jane vanilla
the Hesselite?
No, it's sapphire.
It's the double sapphire sandwich.
Yeah, the sapphire sandwich. Because Hesselite, I'm still a little obsessive compulsive about scratches, and most of
wait, an OCD watch collector? Get out of here.
Oh yeah. So most of what makes contact is the crystal. So a Hesselite scratching up, I don't know if I could deal with. And I like the anti-reflective coating because it's just visibility. Yeah. But this was a watch for the longest time.
Beautiful piece.
I didn't have. there was a time I had 10 Speedmasters in my collection, and I didn't have the original plain Jane one.
Yeah.
And it's such an amazing watch. I could see the timeless appeal in the Speedmaster. And so this was just the 1861 movement, the previous year model, not the upgrade. Because the only thing I really liked about the upgrade was the bracelet.
The bracelet's amazing, beautiful. Beautiful.
It retro fixes to the new model. This one's an Uncle Seiko, but until the actual Omega bracelet comes in. But it's such a simple watch, but it's you definitely see the appeal and how it's survived generations. And this is one of the only things Omega's done very right, is somewhat leaving this model alone. And even their upgrades were tastefully done and carefully done and well thought out. So this is the most significant watch of all the Omega collection. And it's so funny, as big of an Omega collector I was, I didn't have one in my collection until now.
I've never had one. Funny enough, I had a Speedy 57, that line with the leather straps, with the stainless, and it was the slightly bigger model. And the reason I didn't love it was I found it really hard to wind the watch with the chrono. I just found the crown not conducive. Even on the Deville, it's a little difficult, but with the chrono buttons there, I found it very difficult. That was my reason, but I love the look of it. And it's one of those watches like the Big Pilot. Every collector has one or wants one. It's amazing how, some of them are just very timeless.
Yeah. Anything on your radar? What's next? You're always on the hunt. There's nothing.
There's always a hunt. Absolutely. And I think of the ones that got away.
Inspired.
To be honest, the last watch I saw that I really loved was your Breguet with the open the skeleton.
Oh yeah, the tradition.
Yeah, one of the guys on the site, Big Fat Polly. Yes, his handle is Big Fat Polly. He was talking about it. He got me onto Breguet, and I went to the store, and then you bought it, and we had not even talked about it. I'm like, is this guy like reading my mind now? So I kind of love the skeletonized look, and I'm looking more towards there. That's where I'm kind of right now. What about yourself?
Oh, that's an amazing one. Well, like I said, I'm high on Breguet right now, because the rose gold marine with the GMT I love, and the funny thing is the new marines I don't like at all, but the older model is because the case is of the old one is just still more muscular and still dressy and a point edge, and the new one's a little too androgynous. But you see some of those older models, and they're coming up at 50% off their original retail, and so
you can get good deals there.
Steals. And Langa, at some point when I had a moon phase Lang 1, but those have gotten really, price wise have gotten up, and I think that because there's a legitimate supply issue there, it's tough to pay full retail plus tax. So sometimes you want to feel like you got a good deal, at least with Rolex, that if you pay retail, that's your discount price. So
I'll tell you right now, from a grail standpoint, if that platinum Day 36 ever becomes available, please be sure to call me first, because I'm going to match it up with the shirt, not just all in the wear. I'm going to get like 30 of these colors, same ones. I'll just rotate the same shirt, but different ones. I love that one, and I love the 36. And it's funny because we're in the 40, we're in the 36. I love my 36 Datejust. And if there's one thing I would collect, and I would just get different variations of the dials and the bezels and the bracelets. Are different Datejust. I've always loved the Datejust. That to me is the most classic timeless watch, and I could wear Datejust all day long. And like you said, 1970, 1980, 1990, no one really knows, and it's amazing. But especially like mine is a silver face Jubilee with the fluted bezel, but the silver dial has patinaed into a white. So with the older models, if you do the research on Rolex with those dials, you never know the ones from the 70s where they're gonna head. You can have also a brown one, a purple one. I got this white silvery shimmer one, and it's pretty neat. Nice. So yeah, it's like becomes like one of one. It becomes like a one of itself.
I think that's fine, because the big watch trend, you're seeing it now come back down to more reasonable sizes. I think 36 will always be a perfect size, especially for a watch like that, because it wears much larger. I find, I went through all the sizes of the day dates, and the 42, the day date 2 just didn't at all aesthetically work, and it was out of
It
proportion.
was chunky. It was very, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, the bezel didn't work. The 40 is not bad because I have the yellow gold in 40, but I think the 36 is absolutely perfect.
For
Especially
people,
for the type of watch it is.
for people watching this at the end of the day, and like I told you at the beginning of the episode, this is first world problems to the max. You know, it's like when we're coming down, you're wearing a watch. Let's say you have a watch worth, let's say 10 grand. Let's say, and that's considered a cheapy one, right? And someone's like, that's a gorgeous watch. Like that must have cost like $500. Like, and it's not, we're not making fun of these people. It's just that this is like, they cannot fathom in their minds. Like the same way for me, I can't imagine spending $500,000 on a car. Like it just, like my mind cannot process it. And I can't imagine spending $100 million on a mansion, you know? So again, one person's beater is another man's grail. It's amazing how that works. And that's where, again, you know, one of the first things RJ said at the beginning was, we're not trying to exclude people. Just, you know, if somebody's wearing a $100,000 watch and somebody's wearing a $1,000 watch, we can all appreciate the hobby the same way. And it's actually wanting to include people and not exclude them. And that's one of the things with Rolex now. If you can't get that dream Rolex that you think is your dream, go spend some time, like join a collector site like CWC, you know, start going on the forum, start talking to people, start learning about the craft. And you'll be amazed at how many great brands there are. You get some great deals out there, especially secondhand. And you know what? A lot of times they're better watches. They're just better constructed, or there's a lot more to them. And when you learn the actual sport of it, it's like when I wear my glasuda, no one knows what the hell a glasuda is except for a collector. And I'm okay with that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're gonna put your handle down under your name there that people are gonna see throughout the episode, RJ, so they'll be able to reach you out. I heavily tell them, check out RJ's Instagram, check out the lifestyle, learn what it is to live the chosen life. And my friend, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come see us.
Anytime.
It's been a pleasure. Hope we'll have you back soon.
Absolutely.
Before Watches and Wonders 2023, we can speculate on the watches then.
For sure.
Amazing. Well, we're gonna sign off, and as we do, like, I'm about to get embarrassed, but let's.
Are we doing?
Bring it out.
I don't know. It's
That's right. And we say we keep it up, and we say keep living the chosen life.
Keep living the chosen life.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Take care.